Let's open with a word.
Lass es mit einem Gebet an.
Dear Heavenly Father,
Lieber himmlischer Vater,
we thank you for this new day,
wir danken dir für diesen neuen Tag.
and we thank you that we can gather here again.
Und wir danken dir, dass wir uns wieder hier versammeln können.
And thank you for your promise to pour the oil in us morning and evening.
Und danke für die Verheißung, dass du das Öl in uns morgens und abends gießen
So
wirst.
please give us the golden oil for our lamps.
Deswegen gib uns das goldene Öl für unsere Lampen.
Please help us, Lord, to receive the instruction and the word that you have for us this day.
Und bitte hilf uns, dass wir das Wort und die Unterweisung erhalten, die du für uns heute hast.
And show us individually how to appropriate that word.
Und zeige uns individuell, wie wir dieses Wort anwenden können.
Please bless Brother Mark and Sister Lucia.
Und bitte segne Bruder Mark und Schwester Lucia.
And please bless the camera and the technique.
Und bitte segne die Kamera und die Technik.
And please bless us here and those who are watching.
Und bitte segne uns hier und auch diejenigen, die zuschauen.
And we invite your presence and thank you in Jesus' name.
Wir laden deine Gegenwart ein und danken dir in Jesu Namen.
Amen.
Amen.
Okay, so we come to Exodus chapter 4.
Gehen wir zu 2. Mose 4.
Okay, so what we've been looking at is this experience right here.
Was wir uns angeschaut haben, war eben diese Erfahrung hier.
And we were originally shown that Moses, when he goes to the burning bush, is a representation of this experience right here.
Und wir haben gezeigt, dass diese Erfahrung, als Mose zu dem brennenden Busch kam, dass es eben diese Erfahrung hier markiert.
Okay, so Christ was 40 days in the wilderness, and Satan comes with his final deception.
Und Christus war 40 Tage in der Wüste und dann kam Satan mit seiner letzten Verführung.
Okay, tested 3 times,
Er
right?
wurde 3-mal geprüft.
Okay, Moses is 40 years in the wilderness as a shepherd.
Und Mose ist 40 Jahre in der Wüste als ein Hirte.
Okay, and then he has this revelation on Mount Horeb.
Und dann hat er diese Offenbarung auf dem Berg Horeb.
Okay, when you bring them together, they're both marking the same point.
Und wenn man das zusammenbringt, dann markiert es beides derselbe Punkt.
Okay, because when the final deception comes, it's where the Lord reveals himself.
Weil wenn die letzte Verführung kommt, dann ist es, wo der Herr sich offenbart.
Okay, and then once Moses sees this lowly shrub not being burned, right, he's then sent, right?
Sobald Mose diesen niedrigen Strauch sieht, der nicht verzehrt wird, wird er dann gesandt.
Okay, it's a parallel to Joshua, what means Jesus.
Das ist eine Parallele zu Josua, was auch Jesus bedeutet.
Christ told him to take off his shoes because he's on holy ground, right?
Und Christus sagt ihm, dass er seine Schuhe ausziehen soll, weil er auf heiligem Boden steht.
Okay, and when Joshua was sent, he was given instructions, right?
Und als Josua gesandt wurde, da wurden ihnen ja Unterweisungen
Okay, and
gegeben.
Moses also, they were given instructions what to do.
Und
Right.
dem Mose wurden auch Unterweisungen gegeben, was er tun sollte.
Okay, and the instructions given to Joshua is that they were to go around Jericho once a day for 7 days, right?
Und die Unterweisung, die Josua gegeben wurde, war, dass sie um Jericho einmal am Tag für 7 Tage lang gehen sollten.
And on the 7th day, they were to go around it 7 times.
Und am
right?
7. Tag sollten sie 7-mal herumgehen.
And what is the 7 times?
Und was ist diese 7-mal oder 7 Zeiten?
No, yes, the curse. What is the 7 times? The 7 times is the curse.
Also
right?
die 7 Zeiten ist der Fluch.
Yes?
Ja.
Okay, So we can see that on the curse that comes upon Jericho is marking the fall of Babylon, right? It's where Babylon is punished,
Und wir
right?
können sehen, der Fluch, der auf Jericho kommt, das ist, also wenn es auf Babylon kommt, wenn Babylon bestraft wird.
Okay, it's where God's people have the victory.
Wo Gottes Volk den Sieg haben.
So the instructions. Yeah, that's the third war. Yes. It's this point here at the end, right?
Das ist die dritte Wehe, das ist der Punkt hier am Ende.
Okay, so Moses is given instructions, right? And he's told to go to Egypt,
Also
right?
Mose werden Unterweisungen gegeben und ihm wird gesagt, er soll nach Ägypten gehen.
Okay, and if you just go to Exodus 4 and verse 21.
Gehen wir zu 2. Mose 4 und Vers 21.
It says, And the Lord said unto Moses, When thou goest to return into Egypt, see that thou do all these wonders before Pharaoh, which I have put in thine hand. But I will harden his heart, and he shall not let the people go. So who's he to stand before?
Also vor wem sollte er stehen?
Pharaoh.
Vor
Right.
Pharao.
Okay. Now, remember when we looked at this, you have the literal birth of Christ and the literal birth of Moses, right?
Wir haben ja die buchstäbliche Geburt Christi und die buchstäbliche Geburt von Mose.
Okay. Moses is the type, right?
Mose ist der Typus.
Because Christ, when he was a child, he was told to flee into Egypt, right?
Weil Christus, als er ein Kind war, wurde ihm gesagt, er soll nach Ägypten fliehen.
So, when Moses was a child, where was he?
Und als Mose ein Kind war, wo war er?
In Egypt,
In
right?
Ägypten.
So it's telling you that the literal birth, in a literal sense, is marking the beginning of the captivity, right?
Das zeigt, dass die buchstäbliche Geburt in einem buchstäblichen Sinne diesen Anfang der Gefangenschaft markiert.
Galatians 4 confirms this thought, right?
Galater 4 bestätigt diesen Punkt.
But the spiritual birth is at the end when they come out of Egypt, right?
Die geistliche Geburt ist am Ende, wenn sie aus Ägypten herauskommen.
Okay, and if you just remind ourselves this point, go to Genesis 15.
Und erinnern wir uns an den Punkt, gehen wir zu 1. Mose 15,
Verse 13.
Vers 13.
And he said unto Abram, Know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. And also that nation whom they shall serve will I judge, and afterward shall they come out with great substance. So when do you come out?
Wann kommst du heraus?
After the judgment.
Nach dem Gericht.
After Babylon or Egypt has been received this punishment, right?
Nachdem Babylon oder Ägypten diese Bestrafung erhalten hat.
Not before, right?
Nicht davor.
Okay, so and that punishment is here at the end. It's the day of the Lord,
Und
right?
diese Bestrafung ist hier am Ende, das ist der Tag des Herrn.
Okay, so just go to Isaiah 13.
Gehen wir zu Jesaja 13.
In verse 1.
Vers 1.
It says, the burden of Babylon. So this is a punishment on Babylon,
Das
right?
ist jetzt eine Bestrafung auf Babylon.
The burden of Babylon, which Isaiah the son of Amos did see. Lift ye up a banner upon the high mountain, exalt the voice unto them, shake the hand, that they may go into the gates of the nobles. I have commanded my sanctified ones, I have also called my mighty ones for mine anger, even them that rejoice in my highness. The noise of a multitude in the mountains, as like of a great people, a tumultuous noise of the kingdoms of nations gathered together. The Lord of hosts mustereth the host of the battle. They come from a far country, from the end of heaven, even the Lord, and the weapons of his indignation to destroy the whole land. Howl ye, for the day of the Lord is at hand. It shall come as what? A destruction from the Almighty.
Eine Zerstörung.
Therefore shall all hands be faint, and every man's heart shall melt, and they shall be afraid. Pangs and sorrows shall take hold of them. They shall be in pain as a woman that travaileth. They shall be amazed one at another. Their faces shall be as flames. Behold, the day of the Lord cometh, cruel, both with wrath and fierce anger, to lay the land desolate. He shall destroy the sinners thereof out of it. For the stars of heaven and the constellations thereof shall not give their light. The sun shall be darkened in his going forth, and the moon shall not cause a light to shine. And I will punish the world for their evil, and the wicked for their iniquity. And I will cause the arrogancy of the proud to cease, and will lay low the haughtiness of the terrible. I will make a man more precious than fine gold, even a man than the golden wedge of Ophir. Therefore I will shake the heavens and the earth, and shall remove out of her place in the wrath of the Lord of hosts, and in the day of his fierce anger. Right. So, there's a bit of a riddle here, right?
Vers 13, das ist ein kleines Rätsel.
Because he says the day of the Lord here is the shaking of the heavens and the earth,
Weil es
right?
sagt, dass der Tag des Herrn die Erschütterung von Himmel und Erde ist.
But where does the shaking of the heavens and the earth begin?
Aber wo fängt die Erschütterung von Himmel und Erde an?
Begin in the seventh place,
Am
right?
Anfang der
But this is speaking about the day of the Lord when Christ comes, right?
Aber das spricht über den Tag des Herrn, wenn Christus kommt.
Okay, and if you just go to Joel
Geht zu Joel,
chapter 2.
Joel Kapitel 2.
Chapter 2 and verse 30.
Joel 2 und Vers 30.
It says, And I will show wonders in the heavens and in the earth, blood and fire and pillars of smoke. The sun shall be turned into darkness and the moon into blood before the great and terrible day of the Lord. So what's the Bible showing us?
Das zeigt uns die Bibel.
Okay, that's not the point.
Die Erschütterung.
No, you've just completely missed the point. The Bible contradicts itself. Isaiah 13 says when. When is the shaking of the heavens and the earth?
Also Jesaja 13 zeigt uns, wann ist die Erschütterung von Himmel und Erde.
Right, so when you get here, is it contradicting
Am
itself?
Tag des Herrn, und wenn
Okay.
es hier steht,
Okay, so I'll ask the
widerspricht sich
question
das.
again. What's the Bible showing us?
Was zeigt uns die Bibel?
No, that's not what it's showing us. Right, the day of the Lord is when Christ comes.
Der Tag
Right?
des Herrn ist keine Zeitspanne, sondern das ist, wenn Christus kommt.
It's showing us that when Christ comes, it's the shaking of the heavens and the earth.
Es zeigt
Right?
uns, wenn Christus kommt, dann ist es die Erschütterung von Himmel und Erde.
Okay, but we also know that when you get to this point, it's the shaking of the heavens and the earth.
Und wir
Right?
wissen auch, wenn man zu diesem Punkt ankommt, dann ist es die Erschütterung von Himmel und Erde.
Okay. Okay, thank you. It's showing it at two different points. That's what the Bible's trying to get us to see,
Also die
right?
Bibel versucht uns zu sehen, dass es an zwei verschiedenen Punkten ist.
Because the point is that we are showing is Moses is going to stand before Pharaoh, right?
Und der Punkt, den wir jetzt sagen wollen, ist, Mose wird ja vor dem Pharao stehen
And he's also going to stand before his people,
und er wird
right?
auch vor seinem Volk stehen.
And he's instructed to show them two signs. The first thing that to show them,
Und
right?
er wird unterwiesen, zwei Zeichen zu zeigen.
And we read, if you go back to Exodus chapter 4,
Und gehen wir nochmal zurück zu 2. Mose Kapitel 4.
right? Because verse 29.
2. Mose 4, Vers 29.
And Moses and Aaron went and gathered together all the elders of the children of Israel, right? This is Matthew 24 and verse 29.
Das
Right?
ist Matthäus 24, Vers 29.
Right? I will send my angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather from one end of heaven to the other. Right?
Ich werde meine Engel senden mit starkem Posaunenschall und sie werden die sammeln von einem Ende des Himmels bis zum anderen.
And verse 30.
Vers 30.
And Aaron spake all the words which the Lord had spoken unto Moses, and did the signs in the sight of the people. And the people believed, and when they heard that the Lord had visited the children of Israel, and that he had looked upon their affliction, then they bowed their heads and worshipped. Right? So they need to bow their head and worship before the day of the Lord cometh. Right?
Sie müssen ihr Haupt beugen und anbeten, bevor der Tag des Herrn kommt.
Because when is Jerusalem destroyed?
Weil wann wird Jerusalem zerstört?
No, just stick with the topic. When is Jerusalem destroyed?
Also bleibt beim Thema, wann wird Jerusalem
What
zerstört?
theme are we talking about?
Über welches Thema sprechen wir?
Okay, so when is Jerusalem destroyed?
Der Tag des Herrn, also wann wird Jerusalem zerstört?
Right, the same point when Babylon's
An
destroyed,
dem
right?
Tag des Herrn, am selben Punkt, wo Babylon zerstört wird.
Okay, so he stands before the people and warns them about the day of the Lord when Jerusalem is going to be destroyed.
Er
Right?
steht dann vor den Leuten und er warnt sie vor dem Punkt, wenn Jerusalem zerstört werden wird.
Stands before the king and warns them about Babylon being destroyed.
Und er
Right?
steht vor dem König und warnt ihn, bevor Babylon zerstört wird.
Is Egypt Babylon?
Ist Ägypten Babylon?
Right.
Ja.
So when he stands before the king, stands before the people, he does the two signs before the people, and they have to humble themselves before the day of the Lord comes, right?
Also er steht dann vor den Pharao und auch vor dem Volk und er muss diese zwei Zeichen vor den Leuten machen. Sie müssen anbeten, bevor der Tag des Herrn kommt. Sich demütigen, bevor
Okay.
der Tag des Herrn kommt.
Right? And when he stands before Pharaoh, Pharaoh needs to comply before the day of the Lord comes, right?
Und wenn er vor Pharao steht, dann muss Pharao sich auch anpassen, sozusagen, bevor der Tag des Herrn kommt.
Okay, but when we look at the seventh plague, right, the punishment begins here, right?
Wenn man aber die 7. Plage anschaut, dann beginnt ja die Bestrafung hier.
Right? It's a progressive punishment,
Es
right?
ist eine progressive Bestrafung.
Okay, and this is this point I was saying. This is these three plagues,
Und
right?
das ist der Punkt, den ich gesagt habe. Das ist dann diese 3 Plagen.
And it's followed by the 7 plagues,
Und es ist
right?
gefolgt von 7 Plagen.
And you'll see why this is important, right?
Und ihr werdet sehen, warum das wichtig ist.
So when we look at Putin comes up and surrounds Jerusalem right here,
Und wenn wir
right?
uns Putin anschauen, er kommt hierher und umlagert hier
Not
Jerusalem.
literally Jerusalem, symbolic,
Nicht
right?
buchstäbliches Jerusalem, sondern symbolisch.
Is the punishments already beginning to come upon him?
Kommen die Bestrafungen, fangen sie schon an, auf ihn zu
Yeah,
kommen.
ever since he started that war, he's in a slow decline, step by step. Every day it's getting worse and worse for him, right?
Ja, seit der Krieg angefangen hat, geht er Schritt für Schritt, geht's abwärts, also langsam aber sicher.
Okay, but his punishment doesn't come until he completes that work that the Lord allowed him to do,
Aber
right?
seine Bestrafung kommt nicht, bis er dieses Werk, was der Herr ihm erlaubt hat zu tun, vollendet.
But when he does, and just go to Isaiah 10.
Dann gehen wir zu Jesaja 10.
So verse 11 is marking the Assyrian
Also
lifting himself up, right?
Jesaja 10, Vers 11, das markiert, wenn der Assyrer sich selbst erhöht.
It said, "Shall I not, as I have done unto Samaria and her idols, so do to Jerusalem and her idols? Wherefore it shall come to pass that when the Lord hath performed his whole work upon Mount Zion and on Jerusalem, I will punish the fruit of the stout heart of the king of Assyria and the glory of his high looks. So when's he going to be punished?
Wann wird er bestraft werden?
When he's finished the whole work that he sent him to do,
Wenn
right?
er das ganze Werk vollendet hat, wofür er ihn gesandt hat, dass er es tun sollte.
Okay, go back to verse 5.
Gehen wir Exodus.
No, go back to verse 5, where we're at.
Also gehen wir zu Vers 5 in Jesaja 10.
It says, O Assyrian, the rod of mine anger. What is the Assyrian?
Was ist der Syrer?
It's this rod in his hand,
Er
right?
ist diese Rute in seiner Hand.
Okay, so go back to Exodus chapter 4,
Gehen wir zurück zu 2. Mose 4.
because there's some theories now flying around about these verses,
Weil
right?
da gibt es jetzt ein paar Theorien, die umherfliegen über diese Verse.
Okay, and as I said, I'm not claiming that I fully understand it, but we have to follow what the scripture is pointing out, not what we think, right?
Und wie ich gesagt habe, ich bin noch nicht, also ich verstehe das noch nicht völlig über diese Verse, aber wir müssen die Schriften erlauben, dass sie es uns erklären.
Okay.
Und nicht unsere eigenen Gedanken.
So these are the signs that he has to do before Pharaoh and before God's people,
Und
right?
das sind die Zeichen, die er tun muss vor Pharao und auch vor Gottes Volk.
Right, so it says, verse 2.
Vers 2.
The Lord said unto him, What is that in thine hand? And he said, A rod. And he said, Cast it on the ground. And he cast it on the ground, and it became a serpent, and Moses fled from before it. Right? So, the point is that when you bring all the scriptures together, right?
Der Punkt ist, wenn man alle Schriften zusammenbringt,
This here marks the point where the shepherd is smitten and the flock is scattered, right?
markiert dieser Punkt, wenn der Hirte geschlagen wird und das Volk oder die Herde sich zerstreut.
Okay, so go to Zechariah chapter 13,
Gehen wir zu Sacharja 13.
because Christ says, this night you will all reject me, right?
Weil Christus hat ja gesagt, diese Nacht werdet ihr mich alle ablehnen.
Yes, just check that is at the right place where it is. No, not that one. It says, in fact, just let me find it in. Yeah, it's there, but okay. Right, so just let's look at verse 7.
Also schauen wir uns Sacharja 13, Vers 7 an.
It says, Awake, O sword, against my shepherd, and against the man that is my fellow, saith the Lord of hosts. Smite the shepherd, and the sheep shall be scattered, and I will turn mine hand upon the little ones. Right? So, we looked at yesterday, because if you go to Mark chapter 14,
Also wir haben uns das gestern angeschaut und wenn wir zu Markus 14 gehen,
in verse 27.
in Vers 27.
It says, And Jesus saith unto them, All ye shall be offended because of me this night. When do you become offended?
Wann nimmst du Anstoß?
When they go to put you to death, it says,
Wenn
right?
sie dich zu Tode ausliefern, das haben wir gelesen.
For it is written. Where was it written?
Es steht geschrieben, wo wurde es
I will
geschrieben?
smite the shepherd and the sheep shall be scattered. Where was it written?
Wo wurde das geschrieben?
In the book of Zechariah chapter 13.
Im Buch Sacharja, Kapitel 13.
So Christ refers Zechariah chapter 13 to himself,
Also
right?
Sacharja wendet Sacharja 13 auf. Christus wendet Sacharja 13 auf sich selbst an.
It says, but after that I am risen, I will go before you to Galilee, right? So, anyway, right? So, Christ, go back to Zechariah chapter 13
Gehen wir zurück zu Sacharja 13
and verse 7.
und Vers 7.
So this is what he was quoting. He says, awake, O sword, against my shepherd, and against the man that is my fellow, saith the Lord of hosts. Smite the shepherd, and the sheep shall be scattered. Right? So we read, when they came for Christ in Galilee, what did all the disciples do?
Und wir haben gelesen, als sie zu Christus
In the
kamen,
Garden of Gethsemane,
Im
what did all the disciples
im
do?
Garten von Gethsemane, was haben alle Jünger getan?
Well, it doesn't use that word. They fled.
Da stand, sie sind geflohen.
Right? So to flee, right, in this sense is marking the point where they're scattered, right?
Also wenn sie fliehen, in diesem Sinne markiert es den Punkt, wenn sie zerstreut sind.
Right? So when the shepherd was smitten, they fled.
Also als der Hirte geschlagen wurde, sind sie geflohen.
Right?
Richtig?
Okay. The Bible is explaining itself, right?
Die Bibel erklärt sich
And the
selbst.
point is that when you read down here, right, just go to Zechariah chapter 13, verse 1.
Hier zu Sacharja 13 und Vers 1.
It says, in that day there shall be a fountain open to the house of David and to the inhabitants of Jerusalem for sin and for uncleanness. And it shall come to pass in that day, saith the Lord of hosts, that I will cut off the names of the idols out of the land, and they shall no more be remembered. And also I will cause the prophets and the unclean spirit to pass out of the land. So this is a promise right here that there's going to be a fountain opened,
Das
right?
ist eine Verheißung, dass eine Quelle geöffnet werden wird.
And when they lift up their eyes there, what do they see here?
Und wenn sie hier ihre Augen erheben, was sehen sie hier?
What does John see in Revelation 22?
Was sieht Johannes in Offenbarung 22?
Yeah, he sees this fountain, right? This fountain, the river of life, right?
Sieht diese Quelle, also dieser Fluss des Lebens.
It's their last opportunity to receive the truth before the day of the Lord comes,
Das
right?
ist diese letzte Möglichkeit, die Wahrheit zu erhalten, bevor der Tag des Herrn kommt.
Right? Okay. So, verse 3.
Vers 3.
And it shall come to pass that when any shall yet prophesy, then his father and his mother that begat him shall say unto him, Thou shalt not live, for thou speakest lies in the name of the Lord. And his father and his mother that begat him shall thrust him through when he prophesieth. And it shall come to pass in that day that the prophet shall be ashamed every one of his vision when he hath prophesied. Neither shall they wear a rough garment to deceive. But he shall say, I am no prophet, I am a husbandman, for man taught me to keep cattle from my youth. And one shall say unto him, unto whom?
Und jemand wird zu ihm sagen, zu wem sagen?
To this false prophet,
Zu
right?
diesem falschen Propheten.
What are these wounds in thine hands? Then he shall answer, Those with which I was wounded in the house of my friends. So who is Christ playing the role of?
Also von wem spielt Christus die Rolle?
The false prophet,
Von dem
right?
falschen Propheten.
He took upon him the curse,
Er
right?
hat auf sich den Fluch genommen.
Go on to Galatians chapter 3,
Geht
right?
zu Galater 3.
Verse 13.
In Vers 13.
It says, Christ hath redeemed us from the curse of the law, being made a curse for us. What was he made?
Zu was wurde er gemacht?
A curse,
Zu einem
right?
Fluch.
For it is written, cursed is everyone that hangeth on a tree, right? He took the place of these false shepherds, right?
Er hat diese Stelle von diesen falschen Hirten angenommen.
Okay, so remember when Isaac, when Abraham took Isaac to slay him, right?
Und erinnert euch, als Abraham Isaac genommen hat, um ihn umzubringen.
The Lord says, Abraham, do not this thing, I have provided a ransom,
Da hat
right?
der Herr zu Abraham gesagt, Abraham, mache das nicht, ich habe ein Lösegeld vorbereitet.
Who does Sister White say was the ransom?
Und was sagt Ellen White, wer war das Lösegeld?
Christ. He was the one that paid the price so that Isaac didn't have to die, right?
Christus, weil er war derjenige, der diesen Preis bezahlen musste, damit Isaac nicht sterben musste.
But that ransom was a ram caught in a thicket, right?
Aber dieses Lösegeld war ein Widder, der sich im Dickicht verfangen hat.
And what does the Bible say that ram that was caught in a thicket represents?
Und das sagt die Bibel, was dieser Widder ist, der sich im Dickicht verfangen hat.
It says that it's the king of the north, right?
Es sagt, das ist der König des Nordens,
Antichrist,
Antichristus.
right? The king of the north that's coming up upon the land,
Der
right?
König des Nordens, der aufkommt.
And
über
when
das
you
Land.
go to Isaiah,
Und wenn ihr zu Jesaja geht,
go to Isaiah 43.
geht zu Jesaja 43.
And here it's speaking about the very point that we're speaking about. It says, For I am the Lord thy God, the Holy One of Israel, thy Saviour. I gave Egypt for thy ransom, Ethiopia and Seba for thee. Right?
Vers 3.
Okay, now, when the shepherd is smitten in the Garden of Gethsemane, it's an internal work,
Wenn
right?
der Hirte geschlagen wird im Garten Gethsemane, ist das ja ein internes Werk.
Okay, but when this happens at the end, it's an external punishment, right, on Babylon. It's the final punishment on Jerusalem also, but here is where the external punishment comes. That's the point I want to make.
Also hier ist auch die letzte Bestrafung von Jerusalem, aber es ist eben
Where the external punishment comes.
also es ist der Punkt, den ich machen möchte, ist dort, wo diese externe Bestrafung dann kommt.
Okay,
Über
because
Babylon.
the smiting of the shepherd is the smiting internally,
Weil
right?
das Erschlagen des Hirten ist das Schlagen intern.
Because the flock gets scattered, and then Christ is going to gather those little ones. That's what's taking place in here,
Weil
right?
die Herde wird dann zerstreut und Christus wird jetzt diese Kleinen dann sammeln. Das geschieht da drin.
Okay, and then just read here, it says, because right in here is the promise that the three Hebrews claimed when they went into the fiery furnace.
Weil hier drin ist die Verheißung, die die 3 Hebräer in Anspruch genommen haben, als sie durch den Feuerofen gingen.
Verse 2.
Vers 2.
When thou passest through the waters, I will be with thee, and through the rivers they shall not overflow thee. When thou walkest through the fire, thou shalt not be burned, neither shall the flame kindle upon thee. So, when midnight came, right, and they came face to face with death, they claimed this promise, right?
Also als Mitternacht kamen sie mit dem Tod ins Angesicht kamen, haben sie diese Verheißung in Anspruch genommen.
They said, we will not bow down to you, king, because we believe this promise that the flame will not kindle upon us,
Sie haben
right?
gesagt, wir werden uns dir König nicht beugen, denn wir glauben diese Verheißung, dass die Flamme wird uns nicht verzehren.
Because in verse 3,
In Vers 3.
For I am the Lord thy God, the Holy One of Israel, thy Saviour. I gave Egypt for thy ransom, Ethiopia and Seba for thee. Who was the ransom?
Wer war das Lösegeld?
The Gentiles, right?
Ägypten, also die Heiden.
Okay. So, since thou wast precious in my sight, thou hast been honourable, and I have loved thee. Therefore I will give men for thee and people for thy life. Okay? And this is all comes back to this the story of the scapegoat, right?
Es kommt alles zurück zu der Geschichte von dem Sündenbock.
They put you on the cross first, but it's not going to hold, right? It's going to come back upon them,
Wir
right?
werden dich zuerst ans Kreuz bringen, aber das wird nicht anhalten. Es wird wieder auf sie zurückkehren.
Okay, so go to Exodus chapter 15.
Gehen wir zu 2. Mose 15.
Genesis. Do you have this? Okay. Yeah, go to verse 22.
Exodus oder Genesis?
No, I said I was in Genesis. Go Exodus 15, verse
Exodus.
22.
Das ist 2. Mose 15, Vers 22.
Okay. So it says, so Moses brought Israel from the Red Sea, and they went out into the wilderness of Shur, and they went 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. And when they came to Marah, they could not drink of the waters of Marah, for they were bitter. Therefore the name of it was called Marah. Right? So what does Marah mean?
Was bedeutet Mara?
Bitterness, right?
Bitterkeit.
So when Ezekiel, right, is sent, how does he go?
Also als Ezekiel gesandt wird, wie geht er dann?
In Ezekiel chapter 3, he's sent in bitterness,
In
right?
Ezekiel 3, da wird er mit Bitterkeit gesandt.
It says, and the people murmured against Moses, saying, what shall we drink? And he cried unto the Lord, and the Lord showed him a what? A tree, right?
Der Herr hat ihm einen Baum gezeigt,
Which when he did what? Cast it into the waters. And the waters were made sweet. There he made for them a statute and an ordinance, and there he proved it. So what does this illustrate?
Was stellt das dar?
Baum,
The what,
the tree
What tree?
was cut down.
Oh, we're way off on a tangent here. Why are we talking?
We read that cursed is this man who hang on a tree.
Yes, right. Okay, so
And this tree falls in the water, it's like Christ falls
right. So
down. And
okay, but look, just read what it says,
Wir haben
right?
ja gelesen, verflucht ist jeder,
Verse
der am
25.
Baum
Yes.
hängt.
You're in the right area, right? It says, and he cried unto the Lord, and the Lord showed him a tree, which when he did what?
Also Vers
Cast it into the waters.
Er hat den Baum ins Wasser geworfen.
No, Margaret, you're talking about a completely different illustration. You're talking about Babylon, right?
Also spricht er über Babylon,
We're-
wo der Baum
We're
abwächst.
referring to these two signs.
Und wir
What
beziehen,
was the sign that he showed to Pharaoh?
wir beziehen uns ja auf diese zwei Zeichen. Was war das Zeichen, was er dem Pharao gezeigt hat?
What was the sign he showed to Pharaoh? What did he do?
Was hat er bei dem Zeichen
cast
getan?
down the
He cast down the
on
rod.
ground.
Er hat die Rute niedergeworfen.
I'll just say that.
No, you mentioned something about a serpent.
Oh, that's the rod, right?
Follow the narrative. He didn't cast down a serpent. He cast down a rod, right?
Er hat eine Rute, also einen Stab niedergeworfen.
Okay, this is what I'm saying. Follow the narrative, right?
Also folgt der Erzählung.
So it's here. It says he cast down a tree, right?
Er hat einen Baum niedergeworfen, sagt es hier.
Okay, it's this same thing, right?
Ist
And-
dasselbe.
It changed the waters from bitter to sweet,
Und es
right?
hat die Wasser von bitter zu süß verändert.
Okay, go to Revelation 10.
Geht zur Offenbarung 10.
Right, we've gone through this, right? We've shown Angel of Revelation 10 comes down here, right?
Und wir sind da durchgegangen, haben gezeigt, dass der Engel von Offenbarung 10 hier herunterkommt.
The book is open,
Das
right?
Buch ist geöffnet.
Okay, so verse 2.
Vers 2.
And he had in his hand a little book open, and he set his right foot on the sea and his left foot on the earth. And he cried with a loud voice, as when a lion roareth. And when he had cried, 7 thunders uttered their voices. And if you go to verse 8,
Und wenn ihr zu Vers 8 geht,
and the voice which I heard from heaven spake unto me again, and says, Go and take the little book which is open in the hand of the angel which standeth upon the sea and upon the earth. And I went unto the angel and said unto him, Give me the little book. And he said unto me, Take it and eat it up, and it shall make thy belly what? Bitter. It's the waters of Mara, right?
wird deinen Bauch bitter machen. Das sind die Wasser von Mara.
But it shall be in thy mouth sweet as honey, right?
Und
So the
dein Mund wird es süß wie Honig sein.
bitterness is made sweet, right?
Also die Bitterkeit wird süß gemacht.
Okay, so the point is that Christ goes to the cross
Yes.
right there to by him doing this right here, he takes away your reproach,
Yes.
right?
Also indem Christus hier für dich ans Kreuz geht, nimmt er deine Schmach weg.
He turns your bitter experience into something that's sweet,
Er
right?
wandelt deine bittere Erfahrung in etwas das süß ist.
Right? He gives you sweet waters,
Er
right?
gibt dir süße Wasser
Okay, in this bitter experience.
in dieser bitteren Erfahrung.
Okay, he's role playing the false prophets that get smitten here,
Und er
right?
spielt die Rolle von den falschen Propheten, die hier erschlagen werden.
So that you don't have to suffer what they're going to suffer,
Damit
right?
du nicht das erleiden musst, was sie erleiden
But in
müssen.
order to do that, you must exercise faith,
Aber
right?
damit du das tun kannst, musst du Glauben ausüben.
Because when midnight comes, right, which is the night of the Passover,
Weil
right?
wenn Mitternacht kommt, was die Nacht des Passa ist,
Okay, we'll come back to that a bit later, right?
wir werden dann später darauf zurückkommen,
Okay, you must have the blood on the doorpost,
da musst
right?
du das Blut an den Türpfosten
Which is
haben,
the seal,
was das Siegel ist,
which is the robe of righteousness.
was dieses Gewand der Gerechtigkeit ist.
And when you exercise faith there, like in the story of Joshua in Zechariah chapter 3,
Und wenn du dann Glauben hier ausübst, so wie Josua in Sacharja 3,
what does he do?
was macht er?
Takes away your filthy garment and gives you the righteous garment. He presents you before his Father,
Er
right?
nimmt dann deine schmutzigen Gewänder weg und gibt dir ein gerechtes Gewand und er präsentiert dich vor dem Vater.
You then become this sign,
Du wirst jetzt das Zeichen,
right?
richtig?
Okay. So these signs are teaching us something about this point.
Diese
Right?
Zeichen, sie lehren uns etwas über diesen Punkt.
Okay, he casts down the rod that becomes a serpent,
Er
right?
wirft diese Rute nieder und sie wird zu einer Schlange.
And just remind myself, it's in Numbers 21.
Dann gehen wir zu 4. Mose 21.
Verse 6.
In Vers 6.
And the Lord sent fiery serpents among the people, and they bit the people, and much people of Israel died. Therefore the people came to Moses and said, We have sinned, for we have spoken against the Lord and against thee. Pray unto the Lord that he take away the serpents from us. And Moses prayed for the people. And the Lord said unto Moses, Make thee a fiery serpent, and set it upon a pole. And it shall come to pass that every one that is bitten, when he looketh upon it, shall live. Right? Christ says to them when they come here, look up,
Yes.
right?
Christus sagt zu ihnen, wenn sie hier ankommen, schau auf.
He's this rod that's cast to the ground and becomes a serpent,
Er
right?
ist diese Rute, die zum Boden geworfen wird und zu einer Schlange wird.
He stands in place of you, right?
Er steht an der Stelle von dir.
Okay, but all those that reject this, what are they going to do?
Aber all diejenigen, die das ablehnen, was werden sie
They
tun?
will flee, they will be scattered,
Sie
right?
werden fliehen, sie werden
So they
zerstreut werden.
cast the rod to the ground, it became a serpent, and it says Moses fled from before it, right?
Also wenn diese Rute auf den Boden geworfen wird und eine Schlange entstanden ist, dann ist Mose vor ihr geflohen.
So the Lord begins his judgment there, right?
Also der Herr fängt sein Gericht hier an.
And I want us to see that these judgments begin with the first 3 plagues,
Und ich möchte
right?
euch zeigen, dass diese Gerichte mit diesen ersten 3 Plagen
Because we
anfangen.
see that in this type of the 7th plague, the judgment begins here and it's progressive, leading down to the day of the Lord.
Weil wir
Right?
sehen, dass in diesem Typus der 7. Plage seine Gerichte hier anfangen und sie sind progressiv bis zum Tag des Herrn.
Okay, so go now to go back to Exodus. Go to Exodus chapter 7.
Geht zu 2. Mose 7.
One second, let me find it. Excuse me, I marked this yesterday, but now, there it is. Okay, right. So, in we marked it chapter 5 because remember the Lord makes Moses a god unto Pharaoh and he makes Aaron his prophet. He's these 2 witnesses here, right?
Denkt daran, der Herr macht Mose zu dem Gott für Pharao und Aaron macht er zum Propheten und das sind diese 2 Zeugen hier.
Okay, so in Revelation 11, they go to put the 2 witnesses to death and they're resurrected. He says, come up hither.
Also in
Right?
Offenbarung 11, da tun sie die 2 Zeugen zu Tode bringen und dann stehen sie wieder auf und der Herr sagt, kommt hier herauf.
So, this is where you become gods. It's also where you become his mouth, his prophet, right?
Also hier wirst du zu den Göttern und du wirst auch zu seinem Mund, also dieser Prophet.
So 2 witnesses are representing these things, and they stand here and give this last warning message.
Die 2
Right?
Zeugen, sie stellen das eben dar und sie stehen hier und geben diese letzte Warnungsbotschaft.
Okay, so and when he shows the signs before Pharaoh, what happens?
Und wenn er diese Zeichen vor Pharao zeigt, was geschieht dann?
Just let me just. I think it's here. Yes, go to chapter 7 where we were, right?
Geht zu Kapitel 7
And let's begin verse 1. This is what we were talking about.
und fangen wir in Vers 1 an, darüber haben wir gesprochen.
And the Lord said unto Moses, See, I have made thee a god to Pharaoh, and Aaron thy brother shall be thy prophet. Thou shalt speak all that I command to thee, and Aaron thy brother shall speak unto Pharaoh, and he shall send the children of Israel out of his hand. So we read yesterday, Deuteronomy 18:18, when he raises up a prophet, they will speak all the words that I command. Right?
Also wir haben gestern in 5. Mose 18, Vers 18 gelesen, wenn er diesen Propheten sendet, da wird er sprechen, alles, was er ihm gebietet.
Speaking about Christ,
Er
right?
spricht dann über Christus.
And I will harden Pharaoh's heart and multiply my signs and my wonders in the land of Egypt. But Pharaoh shall not hearken unto you, that I may lay my hand upon Egypt. So, when they come before Pharaoh, has Pharaoh been punished yet?
Und wenn sie vor Pharao kommen, wurde Pharao schon bestraft?
No.
No, right?
Nein.
Okay, so I just wanted this other point. Go to Revelation 12.
Gehen wir jetzt zur Offenbarung 12.
Because it's been argued that Revelation 12, right, is marking this point.
Weil
Right.
es wird argumentiert, dass Offenbarung 12 diesen Punkt hier markiert.
Okay, so. Okay, let's just begin in verse 1.
Fangen wir in Vers 1 an.
It says, There appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. Who is this?
Wer ist das?
Just think back to Lauren's study not yesterday or the day before.
Denkt an Lorenz Studium von vorgestern.
It's who, sorry? It's the church triumphant, but where is it marked on
Die
here?
triumphierende Gemeinde, und wo ist das auf der Linie markiert?
Okay, so the first, this is where the first place you have the church triumphant, right?
Das ist dieser erste Punkt, wo man eine triumphierende Gemeinde hat.
Okay, and she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth. So what's she doing in this time?
Was tut sie in dieser Zeit?
What did Miller do when he got here?
Was hat Miller getan, als er hier
What,
ankam?
yeah, he cried, and what did he say?
Er hat gerufen, und was hat er gesagt?
Take care of the worship or the jewels.
Yeah, these little ones, right?
Er hat über diese kleinen gesprochen, diese
Okay.
Juwelen.
She's crying, she's travailing in birth, she's interceding for all these ones that she wants to bring forth,
Sie
right?
ruft und liegt in Wehen, und sie hält Fürbitte für all diejenigen, die sie noch retten will.
It says, And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns upon his heads. Who's the dragon?
Wer ist der Drache?
And historically, it was Herod, right?
Historisch war das Herodes.
And it was where Herod went to put the child to death, right?
Das war, wo Herodes dann ging, das Kind zu Tode zu bringen.
Okay? So, Herod is the civil power, right?
Herodes ist die Staatsmacht.
Christ was to go into Egypt until when?
Christus sollte nach Ägypten gehen, bis wann?
Oh, until the death of Herod,
Bis
right?
zum Tod von Herodes.
So, Herod's not dead here,
Also Herodes ist hier noch nicht tot.
right? And it says, so there's this war going on between the dragon and the church triumphant that have come up hither here,
Und
right?
da findet jetzt ein Krieg statt zwischen dem Drachen und der triumphierenden Gemeinde, die hier heraufgekommen ist.
And his tail drew the third part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. And she brought forth a man-child, who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. Right? So when do you become the ruler over all the nations?
Wann wirst du zum Herrscher über alle Nationen?
After this experience, right here, right?
Nach dieser Erfahrung, also hier am Ende.
That nation whom thou wilt serve, I will punish. Right?
Dieser Nation, denen du dienen wirst, werde ich bestrafen.
Right? And just go to verse 7, it shows you the same illustration.
Wenn
Right?
es zu Vers 7 geht, zeigt es uns dieselbe Darstellung.
There was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels, and prevailed not. Neither was their place found any more in heaven. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. So when is Satan cast out?
Wann wird Satan herausgeworfen?
No, let's follow this narrative on the board here. When is he cast out?
Folgen wir dieser Erzählung auf der Tafel. Wo wird er hinausgeworfen?
We just said it, right? There's the church triumphant, and Herod is
When
Herod is the dragon, right?
Also hier ist die triumphierende Gemeinde und Herodes ist dieser Drache.
Pharaoh is also the dragon, right?
Pharao ist auch der
So
Drache.
he's standing before Pharaoh here, and Pharaoh's persecuting them, right?
Und der steht jetzt hier vor Pharao und Pharao verfolgt sie.
So Moses and Pharaoh is Christ and Satan,
Also
right?
Mose und Pharao ist Christus und Satan.
Right? It's Christ and the dragon,
Es
right?
ist Christus und der Drache.
And there's a war going on in here,
Und
right?
hier drin findet ein Krieg statt.
Right? So where is the dragon cast out?
Wo wird der Drache hinausgeworfen?
At the end,
Am Ende.
not here, right?
Nicht hier.
Can't take Revelation 12 because it says something similar to what it says in Exodus 3 and stick it here,
Du kannst
right?
nicht Offenbarung 12 nehmen, nur weil es was Ähnliches sagt wie in 2. Mose 3 und es hier platzieren.
Right? That's not following Miller's rules,
Das
right?
ist nicht Millers Regeln folgen.
Miller's rule says when you bring all the subject matter together, and when you can prove your theory without a contradiction, then you know you have the truth, right?
Millers Regeln sagen, man muss alle Beweise zu dem Thema zusammenbringen und wenn man seine Theorie ohne einen Widerspruch formulieren kann, dann kann man wissen, dass man die Wahrheit hat.
Also, go back to the book of Exodus, chapter 7, right?
Und auch noch gehen wir nochmal zurück zu 2. Mose 7.
So it's when Moses and Aaron are standing before Pharaoh that he casts his rod and it turns to a snake,
Das
right?
ist, wenn Mose und Aaron vor Pharao stehen und er wirft dann diesen Stab runter und es wird zu einer Schlange.
And he begins to bring the warnings to Pharaoh,
Und er
right?
fängt jetzt an, die Warnungen dem Pharao zu geben.
Okay, because verse 5.
Vers 5.
And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord when I stretch forth mine hand upon Egypt and bring out the children of Israel from among them. So it's a warning of what he's going to do,
Das
right?
ist eine Warnung von dem, was er tun wird.
Future,
Über
right?
die Zukunft.
And Moses and Aaron did as the Lord commanded them, so did they. And Moses was 80 years old, and Aaron 83 years old when they spake to Pharaoh. And the Lord spake unto Moses and unto Aaron, saying, When Pharaoh shall speak unto you, saying, Show a miracle for you, then thou shalt say unto Aaron, Take thy rod and cast it before Pharaoh, and it shall become a serpent. And Moses and Aaron went in unto Pharaoh, and they did so as the Lord had commanded. And Aaron cast down his rod before Pharaoh and before his servants, and it became a serpent. Right? So it's marking the point at the beginning here, right, where the warning is being given before the judgment upon Pharaoh comes. Right?
Das markiert diesen Punkt hier am Anfang, wo die Warnung gegeben wird, bevor das Gericht über Pharao kommt.
Okay, so now we're not going to look at the individual plagues because that's a study all by itself.
Und wir werden jetzt nicht die einzelnen Plagen anschauen, weil das ist ein Studium für sich selbst.
Okay, but when he rejects these two signs, the first plague comes in verse 14.
Aber als
right?
er diese zwei Zeichen abgelehnt hat, kommt die erste Plage und das ist in Vers 14.
And then chapter 8, verse 1 comes the second plague.
Und in Kapitel 8, Vers 1 kommt die zweite Plage.
Okay, but let's go to chapter 8 and verse 16.
Gehen wir jetzt zu Kapitel 8 und Vers 16.
Okay, these are the first three plagues.
Das sind die
Right?
ersten drei Plagen.
It says, And the Lord said unto Moses, Say unto Aaron, Stretch out thy rod, and smite the dust of the land, that it may become lice throughout all the land of Egypt. And they did so, for Aaron stretched out his hand with his rod, and smote the dust of the earth, and it became lice in man and in beast, and all the dust of the land became lice throughout all the land of Egypt. Okay, so there you go.
In Deutsch ist es Vers 20.
Vers 16?
Ja.
Okay, im Deutschen ist es Vers 20.
So, the first three plagues, right? Now, what's the difference between the first three plagues and the last seven?
Und was ist jetzt der Unterschied zwischen den ersten drei Plagen und den letzten 7?
Okay,
Land.
no, just that's true, but that's not what I'm asking.
Okay.
But it's correct what you're saying. But so go to verse 10.
Geht zu Vers 10.
And Moses and Aaron went in unto Pharaoh, and they did so as the Lord had commanded. And Aaron cast down his rod before Pharaoh and before his servants, and it became his... Okay, excuse me.
It's another.
Go to verse... okay, that's it. Go to verse 20, excuse me.
In Chapter 8.
It's chapter 7.
Gehen wir zu
Okay.
Kapitel 7 und Vers 20.
Yeah, excuse me, I jumped back there, right? It says, And Moses and Aaron did so as the Lord commanded, and he lifted up the rod and smote the waters that were in the river, in the sight of Pharaoh, and in the sight of his servants, and all the waters that were in the river turned to blood. This is the first plague.
Das ist die erste Plage.
And the fish that was in the river died, and the river stank, and the Egyptians could not drink of the water of the river, and there was blood throughout all the land of Egypt. And the magicians of Egypt did so with their enchantments, and Pharaoh's heart was hardened. So why was Pharaoh's heart hardened?
Warum wurde Pharaos Herz verhärtet?
We call it magicians.
Because,
The same.
okay, the magicians, these are external magicians, right?
Weil diese Magier, das sind ja externe Magier.
Okay, this would be the false prophet at work,
Das
right?
wäre dieser falsche Prophet, der am Werk ist.
Okay, externally,
Extern.
right? And they are counterfeiting everything,
Und
right?
sie fälschen alles.
So when you come to chapter 8,
Wenn wir zu Kapitel 8 gehen,
in verse 6,
und Vers 6, und im Deutschen sind es immer 4 Verse mehr.
it says, And Aaron stretched out his hand over the waters of Egypt, and the frogs came up and covered the land of Egypt. And the magicians did so with their enchantments, and brought up frogs upon the land of Egypt. Right? So they're counterfeiting it, right?
Sie fälschen es.
So now come back to verse 17,
Geht jetzt zurück zu Vers 17, im
Das ist
Deutschen
der
Vers 21.
third plague, right?
Das ist die dritte Plage.
And they did so, for Aaron stretched out his hand with his rod, and smote the dust of the earth, and it became lice in man, and in beast, and all the dust of the land became lice throughout all the land of Egypt. And the magicians did so with their enchantments to bring forth lice, but they could not.
Yes.
Right?
Sie konnten es nicht.
So when you get to the third plague, they are not able to counterfeit it anymore,
Also
right?
wenn sie zu der dritten Plage gehen, dann sind sie nicht mehr in der Lage, es zu fälschen.
Their power has come to an end.
Ihre Macht
Right.
ist zu einem Ende gekommen.
It says, So there were lice upon man and upon beast. Then the magician said unto Pharaoh, This is the finger of God. Right?
Dies ist der Finger Gottes.
So, just go to Daniel chapter 5.
Gehen wir zu Daniel 5.
In verse 5.
In Vers 5.
So, Belshazzar, right, he is somebody that makes this Sunday law, right?
Belsatzer ist jemand, der das Sonntagsgesetz macht.
Okay, and he obviously doesn't heed the warnings that the Lord gave them prior to this.
Und er beachtet offensichtlich die Warnungen nicht, die der Herr davor gegeben hat.
It says, In the same hour came forth fingers of a man's hand, and wrote over against the candlestick upon the plaister of the wall of the king's palace. And the king saw the part of the hand that he wrote. Then the king's countenance was changed, and his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his loins were loosed, and his knees smote one against another. Right? So the king cried aloud to bring in the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers. And the king spake and said to the wise men of Babylon, Whosoever shall read this writing and show the interpretation thereof shall be clothed with scarlet and have a chain of gold about his neck, and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. Right? But they are not able to interpret the vision.
Aber
Right?
sie sind nicht in der Lage, die Vision zu interpretieren.
Finally, Daniel is called in, and he stands before the king. Same place. Right?
Dann letztendlich wird Daniel hereingerufen und der steht jetzt vor dem König an demselben Ort.
Right? And he's explaining to him the vision. Right?
Und er erklärt ihm die Vision.
And what's he explaining to him?
Und was erklärt er ihm?
What the finger of God is, right?
Was der Finger Gottes ist.
The curse,
Der Fluch.
okay? Because the fingers of a man's hand came and wrote on the wall many, many tekelu farsin,
Weil
right?
dieser Finger einer Menschenhand kam und hat auf die Wand Mene Mene Tekel Upharsin geschrieben.
Okay, and it led to the destruction of Babylon,
Und das hat
right?
zu der Zerstörung von Babylon geführt.
And the destruction of Babylon we read about in Isaiah 13,
Und über die Zerstörung von Babylon haben wir in Jesaja 13 gelesen.
right? It's the day of the Lord.
Es ist der Tag des Herrn.
So, the point I want you to get to see is you have these first 3 plagues, right? And it leads to this punishment. It leads to the close of probation,
Also
right?
den Punkt, den ich euch sehen lassen möchte, ist, dass man eben
This punishment, it leads, the first 3 plagues leads to the close of probation.
okay, dass diese ersten 3 Plagen, diese Bestrafung, sie führen dann zum Ende der Gnadenzeit.
So, go back to Exodus chapter 8.
Wieder zurück zu 2. Mose 8.
Because we know, right, when the close of probation comes, right, that what did God's people do right here?
Also wir wissen, wenn das Ende der Gnadenzeit kommt, was hat Gottes Volk getan?
Come on, brothers and sisters, it's so difficult. When the close of probation comes, what do God's people do? Who are God's people when the close of probation comes?
Wenn das Ende der Gnadenzeit kommt, was tut Gottes Volk? Who is God?
Yes. Who is God's people and what do they do?
Wer ist Gottes Volk dort und was tun sie?
Sing.
The 144,000. What do they do?
Die 144.000 und was tun sie?
They flee.
Sie fliehen.
Thank you, right? Go to Revelation 12.
Okay.
Geht zur Offenbarung 12.
We've studied this out. When are they fleeing?
Wir haben das ausstudiert. Wann fliehen sie?
Okay, we've already marked when they're fleeing. They come to the close of probation, the 144,000, and they flee. But what's happening whilst they're fleeing?
Also
The plagues.
beim Ende der Gnadenzeit sind die 144.000 und sie fliehen dann. Aber was geschieht, während sie fliehen?
Details matter. Which plagues?
Die Plagen fallen. Welche Plagen?
What?
The one, the first,
The first
first 5.
5 plagues. Thank you.
Die
Right?
ersten 5 Plagen.
Because they must be in Christ before which plague?
Weil sie müssen in Christus sein, vor welcher Plage?
The 6th plague.
Der 6. Plage.
Right? They're not fleeing at the 6th plague. If they've not fled, they're not part of the 144,000.
Sie
Right?
fliehen, sorry, they don't flee.
I said if they have not fled, right, then they are not part of the 144,000.
Wenn sie nicht geflohen sind, dann sind sie nicht Teil von den 144.000.
Okay, so when you go to Revelation 12, right,
Gehen wir zur Offenbarung 12,
verse 5,
Vers 5.
it says, "And she brought forth a man-child, and the man-child is Christ."
Das
Right?
Menschenkind ist Christus.
And the point is, when Christ came at the appointed time,
Der
right,
Punkt ist, als Christus an der bestimmten Zeit kam,
how was Christ represented there? In what physical sense?
in welchem physischen Sinne wurde Christus dort dargestellt?
He came literally.
No. In the physical sense, talking about his body. In what condition did he come?
In welchem Zustand kam er, also körperlich gesehen?
Sinful body.
Sinful body, but
But not in his mind.
okay, so he had no evil propensities,
Es war
right?
ein sündiger Körper, aber er hatte einen Verstand ohne böse Neigungen.
Okay, after the first birth, you still have evil propensities,
Nach
right?
der ersten Geburt hast du immer noch böse Neigungen.
It's just the grace of Christ keeps them, as long as you stay in Christ, those evil propensities won't come back up, right?
Aber solange du in Christus bleibst, dann werden diese bösen Neigungen nicht wieder aufkommen.
But when you come to the 7 last plagues, there's no evil propensities, right?
Und wenn du zu den 7 letzten Plagen kommst, da haben sie keine bösen Neigungen.
Because Christ casts down the censer and says, it is done,
Weil
right?
Christus das Räuchergefäß niederwirft und er sagt, es ist geschehen.
And what pours out?
Was wird
The 7
ausgegossen?
last plagues,
Die 7 letzten Plagen.
right? So silence, right? But then he says it is done. He's no longer interceding in the sanctuary for you, right?
Also da ist dann Stille, aber dann wirft er das Räuchergefäß nieder und sagt, es ist geschehen. Dann hält er keine Fürsprache mehr im Heiligtum für
Right?
dich.
The 144,000 directly speak to the Father,
Die
right?
144.000 sprechen dann direkt zum Vater,
No intercessor anymore, right?
ohne einen Fürsprecher.
If they had any evil propensities, they would fall in the 7 last plagues,
Und
right?
wenn sie böse Neigungen noch hätten, würden sie in den 7 letzten Plagen fallen.
Okay, so they perfectly represent Christ,
Also sie stellen Christus perfekt dar.
right?
Richtig.
So, and it says, verse 5,
Und es sagt in Vers 5,
she brought forth a man-child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up to God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she had a place prepared of God that they should feed her there 1,260 days. Perfect fulfillment of the 7 last plagues, right?
Vers 6, das ist dann die vollkommene Erfüllung der 7 letzten Plagen.
And they've got to flee until and get into the mountains before the 6th plague comes,
Und
right?
sie müssen dann fliehen und in die Berge kommen, bevor die 6. Plage kommt.
And then they have this final conflagration leading down to the perfect fulfillment of the 7th plague,
Und
right?
dann kommt diese letzte Conflagration.
Or trouble.
Dann kommt diese letzte Trübsal, die dann zu der 7. Plage führt.
So the point I want to make is that the Revelation 12, marking the rod and where you're fleeing, is here, not here.
Der Punkt
Right.
ist Offenbarung 12, wo es die Route markiert und wo du fließt, ist hier und nicht hier.
The punishment upon Babylon is here, not here,
Die Bestrafung auf Babylon ist hier und nicht hier.
right? So the troubles begin to come upon. Go back to Exodus chapter 8. We'll make this last point.
Also diese Trübsale fangen dann an zu kommen und gehen wir nochmal zurück zu 2. Mose und machen diesen letzten
Okay.
Punkt.
They come upon both God's people and the Egyptians. Everybody's going through this, right?
Diese Bestrafungen kommen auf Gottes Volk und die Ägypter, alle, also beide gehen da durch.
Okay. But when you come to back to verse 19,
Geht zurück zu Vers 19.
it says, "Then the magicians said unto Pharaoh, This is the finger of God, and Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he hearkened not unto them, as the Lord had said." Okay, it says, and let's just read on, verse 20.
Lesen wir weiter, Vers 20.
And the Lord said unto Moses,
Im Deutschen ist es Vers 24.
Rise up early in the morning, and stand before Pharaoh. Lo, he cometh forth to the water, and say unto him, Thus saith the Lord, Let my people go, that they may serve me. Else, if they will not let my people go, behold, I will send swarms of flies upon thee, and upon thy servants, and upon thy people, into thy houses, and the houses of the Egyptians shall be full of swarms of flies, and also the ground whereon they are. And I will sever in that day the land of Goshen, in which my people dwell, that no swarms of flies shall be there, to the end that thou mayest know that I am the Lord in the midst of the earth. And I will put a division between my people and thy people. Tomorrow shall this sign be. So when the first plague of the 7 comes, nothing comes upon God's people anymore. Only upon the Egyptians, right?
Wenn die erste Plage von diesen 7 letzten Plagen kommt, da fällt es nur auf die Ägypter, das geht nicht mehr auf Gottes Volk.
Okay, but what I want you to see, right, Matthew 24 would begin at the time of peace down here, right?
Und was ich euch aber sehen lassen möchte, ist, Matthäus 24 würde ja mit der Zeit des Friedens hier anfangen.
Christ brings you down, he warns you about the Sunday law that's about to come,
Christus bringt dich dann herunter, er warnt dich vor dem Sonntagsgesetz, was dabei ist zu kommen.
and he leads you down through the Sunday law, right,
Und er führt dich dann durch das Sonntagsgesetz hindurch,
to verse 15,
bis zu Vers 15,
where the sign comes and you're to do what?
wo das Zeichen kommt und was sollst du tun?
flee, right? Right, and you have to flee before the sixth plague,
Du
right?
sollst fliehen vor der 6. Plage.
Right, and it leads you down to the point where he comes in, delivers you,
Und er
right?
führt dich dann zu dem Punkt, wo er kommt und dich befreit.
At the seventh plague.
An der 7. Plage.
But we know that Sister White also takes those verses in Matthew 24 and takes them and sticks them in the Sunday law,
Und wir
right?
wissen, dass Ellen White auch diese Verse von Matthäus 24 nimmt und sie nimmt und in das Sonntagsgesetz setzt.
Because verse 15 also marks here where you have to flee,
Weil
right?
Vers 15 markiert es auch hier, wenn du fliehen sollst.
And you have to flee, spiritually speaking, before you get to this point,
Und du
right?
sollst dann geistlich gesprochen fliehen, bevor du zu diesem Punkt kommst.
And it brings you down to the seventh plague, right here.
Und das bringt dich dann bis zu der 7. Plage, hierhin.
And what's the seventh plague?
Und was ist die 7. Plage?
And here, what's the seventh plague?
Hier drin, was ist
3 weeks.
No.
die 7.
In the book of Exodus, what is the seventh plague?
Im Buch in 2. Mose.
We've already dealt with the first. We're dealing with the last seven, right? So this,
Wir
the
sprechen
tenth
jetzt
plague then, if it's, that's too confusing.
die letzten 7 Plagen in 2. Mose und das ist eben dann die 10. Plage.
What is it?
Was ist das?
Destroy
Der zerstörerische
Well,
Engel.
that's part of it, but it's the Passover,
Es ist
right?
das Passa.
So it says, Exodus 12, it brings you there and it says, this is the Passover. And when were they to have the blood on the doorpost? When did they need to have on the garment by?
2. Mose 12 ist ja das Passa und wann müssen sie dieses Blut an den Türpfosten oder dieses Gewand anhaben?
By midnight,
Bis
right?
zu Mitternacht.
Brings you right to this
Das
point,
bringt
right?
dich zu diesem Punkt zurück.
And then when they were going out of Egypt, how many days did it take them to the baptism?
Und als sie aus Ägypten herausgegangen sind, wie viele Tage hat es gebraucht, bis sie zur Taufe kamen?
3 days.
3
days.
1, 2, 3. Right? And here
1, 2, 3.
is the baptism.
Und
Right?
hier ist die Taufe.
You get my point now? How I was saying that although they're standing before saying, let my people go, right?
Könnt ihr diesen Punkt verstehen? Also, sie stehen ja hier und sagen, lass mein Volk ziehen.
They're saying, let my people go 3 days into the wilderness.
Sagt,
Right?
lass mein Volk ziehen 3 Tage in die Wüste.
So when you bring it line upon line round, it leads you to the point where you get baptized.
Wenn du es
Right?
Linie auf Linie zusammenbringst, dann führt es dich zu dem Punkt, wenn du getauft wirst.
Everybody follow.
Kann jeder folgen.
Bible explains itself,
Die
right?
Bibel erklärt sich selbst.
Okay. So I think that you'll find if you follow all those principles and look at them closely yourself, you'll see that it's a perfect fit.
Wenn ihr all diese Prinzipien zusammenbringt und denen folgt, dann werdet ihr sehen, dass es vollkommen passt.
Okay. Anyway, let's close.
Lasst uns dann abschließen.
Dear Heavenly Father,
Lieber himmlischer Vater,
we thank you for this morning and for the study.
wir danken dir für diesen Morgen und dieses Studium.
And we thank you that you help us to better understand the meaning of these ancient stories in our time.
Und wir danken dir, dass du uns hilfst, die Bedeutung dieser alten Geschichten besser zu verstehen für unsere Zeit.
And I ask that you would help us today to take these things and put them to practical use.
Und ich bitte dich, dass du uns hilfst, dass wir heute diese Dinge nehmen und sie praktisch umsetzen.
That we would think about them and that we would make the right decisions
Dass wir über sie nachdenken und die richtigen Entscheidungen treffen,
of what class we want to be part of.
von welcher Klasse wir Teil sein wollen.
And I pray that you would give us grace for today.
Und ich bete, dass du uns Gnade für heute gibst.
In Jesus' name. Amen.
In Jesu Namen. Amen.